There is a new purge of the traditional Latin Mass all across the United States and Europe, and we know what may be driving it. And the Pope dropped a new teaching document focused on the poor. Do his solutions hold up? The Prayerful Posse will explore it all next. Welcome to an important Prayerful Posse. Be sure to subscribe to the show. It's a wonderful way to show your support, totally free. And you can visit RaymondArroyo.com to always keep up with us. Let's convene at least part of the Prayerful Posse. Canon lawyer, priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray is here. Father, thank you. This week saw a new phase in this ongoing assault against the traditional Latin Mass. We've been reporting this for years now. A new ban has been announced in the Diocese of Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, that includes Knoxville and Chattanooga, another big town. Recent letters from pastors there announced the TLM parishes, in participation with Bishop Mark Beckman, will, quote, begin to transition to the ordinary form of the Mass after December 28th of this year. Father, this drive to implement the late Pope's directives, Pope Francis's directive against the traditional Latin Mass, continues. Why? What do you think is driving this?
Well, I don't know, but I can suspect that Cardinal Roche, who is in charge of the Dicastery for Divine Worship, must have discussed this with Pope Leo, because it seems that these bishops in America are all now moving to suppress the Latin Mass in parishes and then move it either to one or two chapels or to some other arrangement. But I can't believe that Cardinal Roche would do this without discussing it with Pope Leo. So I'm wondering, we've been hearing that Pope Leo was going to address this. He talked about it in his interview with Elise Allen. So, the question mark is, are the bishops here acting imprudently, or is this following Roman orders? Yeah,
that's very interesting you bring that up. I read the local letters that are coming out, banning the Mass. And this is the traditional Latin Mass. And that's not just about language. As we've said time and time on the show, this is the old rite of the Mass, the ancient rite of the Mass that existed before the Vatican Council. It has different intros. There are different prayers, things that were completely omitted from the new Mass. So even if you celebrate it in Latin, there are missing elements that then were in that traditional Tridentine rite, as it's called. Now, Father, so far, as you mentioned, there's no word yet from Pope Leo on the matter, but this Father David Carter, who's the rector of the Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul there in Chattanooga, he writes in the letter, and I'm going to quote this, he said the local bishop, quote, received a letter from the Dicastery, that's Cardinal Roche's office, asking him to respond with his implementation of Traditionis Custodes in the Diocese of Knoxville. Bishop Beckman reiterated that he loves that people go to the Latin Mass. He does not wish ill upon anyone who loves the ancient things, but he very publicly professed an oath of fidelity to the Roman pontiff and the laws of the church, the same as every priest and deacon under holy orders, end quote. So it looks like Cardinal Arthur Roche at the Vatican's doctrinal office, or rather liturgy office, is insisting that the traditional Mass be stamped out. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it certainly looks like that. But part of the equation that's left out is Cardinal Roche also has the power to issue dispensations and to allow the Mass to continue in parishes. So the document Traditionis Custodes is kind of self-contradictory, because it says in one point that this Mass cannot be celebrated in parish churches. But that fails to take into account that there are Latin Mass groups in the church, such as the Fraternity of St. Peter and the Institute of Christ the King. They operate parishes. They celebrate the Mass in parishes, and their rights were not restricted at all by this document. Thank God. But if it's okay to have the Latin Mass celebrated by one group of priests in a parish, why is it then not allowed to have it for diocesan priests who don't belong to one of those orders? So that's a contradiction the Vatican has never grappled with. And then secondly, Cardinal Roche has granted dispensations to other dioceses to have the Mass in a parish. So if a bishop really wants to have this, and I'm pleased with what the bishop said there, Bishop Beckwith, he has to plead with Cardinal Roche and point out that the spiritual welfare of the faithful is the whole reason we have parishes. And if you say your spiritual welfare doesn't count, you have to leave, that's giving a counter message. That it makes no sense. I mean, here we are saying immigrants are entitled to get into the country illegally, but Latin Mass Catholics can't go to their parish to go to Mass.
Yeah, no, it's incoherent, and it is, I have to say, the letters, the emails that I've been getting over the last few months have been heartbreaking. I mean, people are so broken up about this. They've moved, Father, from other parts of the country to be near a community that celebrated the Latin Mass. And now, in Knoxville, Tennessee, that Mass is gone. They're getting rid of it. Also this term, we're transitioning. The Mass isn't transgendered. It's not in need of transition. What does that even mean? We're transitioning the Mass. It's very odd nomenclature in all of this. But the rector of the Chattanooga Basilica, in saying that he will celebrate, or he's insisting, he's going to celebrate the 2002 Missal in Latin with all the trappings and the incense, and that should be enough. He continues, quote, "We are not idolaters to a particular rite as a parish. We do not reject the validity of the Second Vatican Council or the new order of the Mass. Don't be Protestant. If you feel so strongly about the 1962 edition of the Missal that you would separate yourself from union with the Church rather than follow the current Missal of the Universal Church, I urge you to repent. This is nothing more than the spirit of Protestantism," end quote. Father, your reaction to that? I mean, this is hard talk. The suggestion is that adherence to the old rite is a break with Rome, a break with the Pope.
Well, with due respect to my brother priest, the last thing I would call someone who goes to the 1962 Missal celebration of the Mass is either idolatrous or Protestant. They're neither. They're Catholic. If his critique is correct, then the Fraternity of St. Peter is promoting idolatry and Protestantism by celebrating the traditional Latin Mass with full authorization by the Roman Pontiff. Of course, this isn't the case. What he's saying is that there is no ability for anyone to choose to go to anything else than the new order of the Mass, to which I would say, well, then are you going to also outlaw the Anglican usage Missal, which the Holy See approved of under the pontificate of Pope Francis? And I've celebrated that Mass. It's a beautiful adaptation of the Roman Missal and the Book of Common Prayer. It's completely Catholic. Do people want to go to that? Are they idolatrous because they prefer that to the current Roman Missal? No, what they're doing, unfortunately, is over-exaggerating their claim in order to try to motivate people to act. But that's not how we're supposed to do things in the Church. Don't call someone a Protestant because they want to go to the Mass that was used at the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my other big problem here, and you pointed it out, and I just attended an Armenian Rite Mass that was so beautiful, Father. With they have the curtain and the whole routine in the middle of the consecration is done behind the holy screen. It was incredible. Why are we suddenly singling out the Roman Rite, the ancient Roman Rite, the Tridentine Rite, as something verboten or filthy or dirty, when you have all of these other beautiful rites in the Church that Catholics, in full communion with the Pope, should be free to celebrate? I kind of object to that priest suggesting that people who go to the Tridentine Rite are Protestants and they need to repent. Do they?
You don't have to repent for loving the Mass that was celebrated for, basically since the beginnings of the Church, and then developed organically over time. This was the Mass that St. Therese of Lisieux attended and helped her to become a saint.
Right.
Is she an idolater because she, if asked, probably would prefer to stay at that Mass? We don't know because, of course, she went to the Lord. She's a saint. But this kind of exaggerated language, unfortunately, it's basically defending what I think was a terrible mistake. And I say that with all due respect of Pope Francis, that he had a particular animus, meaning a hostility toward the old Mass and the people who attended it. And I think that hostility, he's entitled to his opinions, but as the pontiff, he's the shepherd. He shouldn't be saying to the flock, if you don't agree with me about the old Mass, you can't go to your parish church and have it. But that makes no sense.
Well, his argument, it's reinforced in all of these letters you see coming out of Tennessee, Michigan, Charlotte, North Carolina. All of them have a theme in common, and that is you people attending this Tridentine rite are breaking unity. And the way for you to be part of the church, unified with the pontiff and the bishops, is to attend the new Mass only. That's the rite of entry. But we have all these other rites who are in all the quote uniate churches in the East. These are all very, at times, very ornate rites, very different from the Novus Ordo. And there's not a felt banner or guitar to be seen. Why the hang up with the Tridentine rite, Father? Why is that the target here?
No, if they are engaging in something that attacks the unity of the church, don't blame them. Blame Pope Benedict, because he authorized it. I mean, this is ridiculous. But Pope Benedict is one of the greatest popes we've had theologically. He understood the liturgy to a highest degree. He thought this was something beautiful, and he spoke about mutual enrichment. No, this is an exaggerated campaign to try and stigmatize the love people have for the traditional Mass. And it's not going to work because it's not based in reality. And it's sad because it reflects a completely deaf ear when it comes to the cry of the we could say the poor. I mean, who's poor in a parish and the people thrown out? This is really sad. I am hoping that Pope Leo will address this. But this spate of closures all over the place is making me wonder if Pope Leo's approving this or not. It's up to him to let us know that. But I'm really upset that this is happening.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm stunned, frankly, because. But as you said earlier, Cardinal Roche wouldn't be doing this without a conversation with the new Pope. There's just no way he would be sending these, what are essentially cease and desist orders to these dioceses, saying, "Okay, when are you going to shut down that old Mass? When are you going to transition it to the new Mass?" I mean, this wouldn't be going on without papal approval. And there was one line, Father, the Pope gave a homily last weekend, and some people pulled this out. He was actually doing an exegesis on the gospel, so you don't know if it actually points a finger to the Latin Mass or not. But he said something like there are types of worship that numb the heart. Some people took that as an indication of where he's going with this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know, because, of course, if he doesn't specify that it's about the Latin Mass, then it may be rash to interpret it that way. But certainly, what numbs the heart is false worship. In other words, engaging in superstition and magic and paganism. That's not what we want. But again, we get back to the central issue. If people have a love for the traditional Mass, isn't there room in the church for them? I mean, I've celebrated that Mass many times over many, many years. And what I'm always happy about is the people who go to it are the most grateful pro-papal Catholics you can find. They love the fact that Pope John Paul II and Benedict heard their cries and gave them something which produces no harm, by the way. The whole idea that there's disunity in the church, you want to know where there's disunity? It's where people hate the Latin Mass and even hate the New Order because they change it so much, as in Germany. You want to find a heretical experience that destroys the unity of the church? Go to a German diocese where a woman gives the sermon, and then you'll find that is where the Mass is becoming a source of scandal and disunity, because the bishops are allowing things that are forbidden.
Yeah. And Father, I have to say, when you talk of numbing the heart, what numbs the heart is a kind of corporate, cold, distant, ever-evolving liturgy that really has no hold on tradition or is attached to anything substantive. That's why you see the young people flocking to the old rite, and not only the old rite, the old traditions. Look, Mother Angelica had this rite 40 years ago. She was complaining that in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, you had a dismantling of tradition and people felt at sea. Well, guess what? We're back to the future again. We're back where we started, and now the old Mass is under attack. Anyway, we'll leave that for now. We'll continue watching.
One more thought.
Yeah.
Remember that song from the 60s, "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love"?
Yes.
Remember that? Can't sing that anymore because some people ain't experiencing the love. You know, they're getting the cold shoulder. They're getting the bums rush out of their
That's
churches.
right. They'll know we are Christians because we're in the isolated chapel in the woods. Yeah, the only people who could make the trek. Okay, last week, Pope Leo made headlines once again. He was caught on a hot mic at a meeting at the Vatican with Bishop Mark Seitz of El Paso, Texas. He's the chair of the USCCB's Migration Committee. And the Pope expressed his wish that the U.S. bishops would speak more forcefully in defense of migrants. This is a bit of that video, but Father, what do you make of this and the emphasis that Pope Leo seems to be giving to the plight of migrants? This is a continuation of Pope Francis. Legal or illegal is never really a distinction made.
Yeah, we see, but that's the crucial distinction, because the issue here in America is not that foreigners want to come here and live here. We have a great experience with legal immigration in this country. You know, I lived in a parish in northern Manhattan. You had a lot of people who were legally there, and they were from different countries. No, we have a tradition in this country of inviting people in, and that's good. No, the question here is law breaking to gain access to the society, and then a legal permanence, and then all the things that go along with it, and then all the abuses that the system gives rise to, such as gangs coming in from Mexico and Colombia and Venezuela, violent people selling drugs. I mean, when you had the 20 million people in the Biden administration time coming into the United States, was this just an innocent walk in the park to, you know, to have better access to something in life? No, this was a bum's rush, and I use that just as a colloquial term. The migrants aren't bums, but some of them are criminals. We have to recognize that. So, yeah. I mean, why is it that you can barge your way into the United States and then be defended by the hierarchs? But if I tried to barge my way into an Episcopal palace and take up residence there and bring in 50 other people, they'd call the police. You know, you have to have order in society, in the nation, in the household, in the Episcopal palace, whatever.
Yeah, well, this is the point. The church and a good, solid society is ordered. There are laws, there are rules, and we're seeing kind of the fudging of all of that. But I do find it difficult to unravel why this fixation with Rome on immigration policy. This is not your affair. Salvation of souls is your affair. And look, if they were worried about that, like the spiritual care of migrants, I'd be like, well, this is their job. Of course they should be defending that. But the enforcement of a law in a given country and calling it inhuman when it's the actions of the criminal elements in that country that are inhuman is bizarre to me. In his recent exhortation, which is a teaching document, Dilexit Te, the Pope calls for the recognition of the human dignity of these aliens seeking, migrating from one place to another. But what of the human dignity, Father, of the citizens and the country's right to protect those citizens?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot there, Raymond. Human dignity consists in not breaking the law, okay? The only way you could say human dignity is promoted by allowing illegal aliens in is by saying the law to prevent their coming in is an offense against human dignity. It's not. You know, we've pointed out many times in discussions here in the DWTN, almost the entire world, certainly most people in the third world, if offered the opportunity, they would come into this country.
Right.
Because, you go from scarcity, poverty, no rule of law, no medical help, all the rest. They come in here, and there's a welfare state in law in many places, and then there's a lot of economic opportunity, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Now, is that sustainable, and can we do that? Of course not. You couldn't have this country overwhelmed by 500 million people showing up.
Right.
So laws that reflect the nation's desire to have an orderly process to come in, they're completely just. The church always recognizes that. Yeah. So I'm afraid we're getting into the adhering to a left-wing liberal agenda of globalism in which borders are treated as an offense. There should be no nation states. There should just be a world governance. That was hinted at in one of the documents in Pope Francis's pontificate. That's not where we want to go. That's a denial of the order of society that has arisen ever since man was created. We went from families to tribes to nations, and then we have the international community, but doesn't destroy anything below it.
Yeah. Well, as you pointed out last week, if this socialist utopia were so attractive to people, we'd be seeing boats going from Miami to Cuba, not the other way around. I mean, that's the direction people are coming. They're seeking a free market, which that is the cure that has helped so many out of poverty, given people enormous opportunities. But this document really downplays it. There's recent papal teaching sort of poo-poos. In fact, the Pope dismisses. Now, whether this is Pope Francis or now Pope Leo, they both kind of take co-ownership of this document, but he dismisses the data, what he calls pseudo data, that supports a free market approach to helping poverty and those in it.
And this document, the new one from Pope Leo, repeats what Pope Francis said: the economy that kills.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not talking about North Korea, Communist China, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Let's look at facts. I don't know how, was it 5 million people have left Venezuela during the communist dictatorship? The drug cartels are sponsored in part by the government. They jail opposition leaders. The woman who just won the Nobel Peace Prize is a Venezuelan political candidate who couldn't be elected because it was a rigged election.
Yeah.
And the real candidate was forbidden from running, so she was the substitute. You want to talk about an economy that kills and where the human spirit is crushed? We should have a papal document about communist-inspired governments and the evil they do to their people, not about free market economy. And there's always room for improvement in any society.
Of course.
But the basic justice is shown that any Venezuelan who's afflicted wants to come to the United States. Which is worse?
Yeah, no, it's elementary. I mean, it's elementary, and as you said, there are always excesses in any economy because people have excesses,
sinners.
and there's crony capitalism and all kinds of things that creep in. But critique that, not an entire system with a broad brush, and point to some utopia that simply doesn't exist. But anyway, it seems as if the Pope's message is being received on the migrant front. There was a Eucharistic procession, Father, by a pair of Jesuits this past week, but they went to an ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois. They tried to gain access to the facility and were denied. What do you make of this? I thought we weren't supposed to politicize the Eucharist or play politics at the communion rail.
Well, I regret that they did that because this was a staged performative act. They had absolute knowledge that without prior permission, they wouldn't be allowed in. So therefore, they were doing it to be filmed, being denied entrance, which they knew they were never going to have. The Holy Eucharist was exposed in a monstrance. We just had the Eucharistic procession across the U.S. For the Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis, and people were kneeling on the sides, as the Eucharist was being processed. Here, instead, it's being accompanied by a flash mob of activists and photographers and film crews in order to make a point. I object to that. I hope that the local bishop would speak to the superior of those priests, because this is not the Holy Eucharist, the holy body and blood of Christ. And we do not use it as a political tool to shame the police or ICE or anybody else.
Yeah, well, I love there was a nun, unhabited sister, who afterward took the microphone, and the two Jesuits are standing there, one holding the monstrance with the cope and everything. I don't know why he's just standing out there, like he's carrying a walking stick. But she said, we tried to get into the ICE facility, but they wouldn't let us bring the sacred bread to the inmates. Well, sacred bread? I mean,
there is no sacred bread. It's the holy body and blood of Christ. Now, Jesus calls it the bread of life. But we're careful that we don't say this is bread. This is the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you confuse people.
So that was an interesting tell, that we're not even sure what we're doing here, but we're using the external. And I share your objection to this. We shouldn't be using the traditions, the ancient practices of the faith to ply our political agenda and basically cause a riot, create a performative moment for the cameras with a political end, not a spiritual one. So the whole thing was heartbreaking to me watching it. Okay, I have some happy news amid all this confusion. We all need a spiritual recharge. I know I do. So I'm going on a cruise to the Grecian Isles in the footsteps of the apostles St. Paul and St. John. We're going to Philippi, Thessalonica, Athens, Corinth, Crete, Patmos, and Ephesus, where I've never been, to visit the Blessed Virgin's house. Monsignor Christopher Nolte will be joining me for daily Mass and reflections, and space is very limited, but this 11-day cruise in September of 2026 is going to be incredible. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. You can reserve a spot there. It's going to be one of those life-changing trips. RaymondArroyo.com. The Vatican announced this week that it has chosen, Father, as a canon lawyer, you will love this, they've finally chosen judges to decide that case of the disgraced Jesuit priest and artist Marko Rupnik, who's been accused of sexually abusing over 24 religious sisters. His religious artwork is displayed all over the world, and up until recently, it was on the Vatican's own website. The 5 judges are women in clergy who do not hold curial positions in the Vatican, the idea being they can operate independently. Now, Rupnik is being charged, Father, canonically, but the question is, I mean, I know he's charged with sex crimes and a religious crime as well. How does that work canonically?
Well, let me say, I'm glad that the judges were appointed, but I'm disappointed we didn't get their names. And secondly, I'm disappointed the Holy See highlighted, instead of their names, the fact that they were appointing women to it. Justice is irrelevant whether it's a man or a woman on the bench. So if they're trying to score political points by saying women are going to be on the bench, judges are appointed because of their competence in the matter at hand. Now, the charges specifically, we have to see what, it's called a libellus or a charge sheet, what it is that the Holy See is going to present to these judges. But certainly there's enough evidence already out there that Father Rupnik has been an inveterate sex abuser and took advantage of his position as spiritual director to inflict criminal behavior upon people, unwilling participants in his crimes. So I think he's going to be convicted and hopefully removed from the priesthood.
Yeah. Also this week, a rather bizarre story. Last Friday, a man entered St. Peter's Basilica, Father. He climbed onto the altar of the confession beneath Bernini's baldacchino, disrobed, and proceeded to urinate on the altar in front of pilgrims who were coming through the Holy Door and people attending Mass on side chapels. Pope Leo's ordered a penitential rite to be performed at the Basilica, which has been performed. Tell us what that penitential rite is, and what do you make of this? This is the 3rd time we've seen somebody desecrate the altar there at St. Peter's.
Yes, no, well, I'll start with the penitential rite, of course. That's to the sanctity of the house of God has been offended by this horrendous behavior, which is gravely sinful, to sacrilege being perpetrated in the house of God. So the penitential rite is performed, and that's a good thing. That's a sign to the community that this kind of behavior offends God and is horrific. But the second point is, you're right, this is the 3rd time there's been an outrage like this, which basically means the security service at St. Peter's Basilica is deficient. And it's deficient in grave ways. The idea that you could have a person do this kind of activity, gain access to an area we shouldn't be, means that there's not enough security present. And I know that's a costly and expensive thing, but it has to occur. There has to be more, plainclothes police in the church there at St. Peter's to protect it, because, you need to go through metal detectors and all the rest to get in. So that's good. But once you're in, this is the kind of thing that's happening. So no, I regret this, and I sympathize with the management of St. Peter's, because the last thing you want is to look at the church as an area for potential crime scene. But you have to face reality. This is the 3rd time, and people get emboldened if they see other people getting away, but they're going to do it. So
that's my
it has to be a show of force.
Yeah, my concern is we're going to get the copycats, and this guy may have been one. You had the guy jumping up there, throwing the candelabras on the floor. There was somebody else who did some other crazy thing, and then this man. This shouldn't happen. And you would think, because it is kind of far removed from the public areas, you would think this wouldn't happen or would be difficult. Somebody would grab the guy before he got up, mounted the steps to the altar. But for whatever reason, Father, I agree with you. The security there is just lacking, which I can't fathom, actually. In another story, I saw this and thought of you. Auxiliary Bishop Ludger Schreppers in Essen, Germany, condemned an act of reparation performed by 4 other bishops last week. The act of reparation was made in response to that so-called LGBT pilgrimage that moved through the Holy Door into St. Peter's Basilica back in September. Bishop Schreppers said the following, quote, "It is a scandalous sign of ecclesiastical narrow-mindedness and an open rejection of all those who long for a church that truly lives the gospel." Father, your thoughts on Bishop Shepherd's reaction to the four brother bishops and that prayer of reparation for this event?
Well, the story, of course, is that Bishop Shepherd is using this comment opportunity to promote homosexual lifestyle in the church. The church is not living the gospel when we condemn people who sinfully desecrate a church by walking in with, gay pride flags and with obscenities written on their T-shirts, when men are holding hands as if they were a married couple. I mean, this was all provocative because this was part of an organized pilgrimage promoting the homosexual lifestyle. That's a subject we've talked about, but it was really outrageous. And these people were allowed to enter St. Peter's, one of them holding like a gay, multicolored rainbow cross. That's the message that goes against the gospel. So Bishop Shepherd, unfortunately, reflects the German hierarchy, which is basically aligned with the secular liberal agenda on matters of sex and morality. And he's outraged when fellow bishops do what bishops have done for the entire history of the church, which is defend the doctrine of the faith. No, he's the one that needs to change his way of thinking.
Father Jerry, as always, I thank you, grateful that you joined us. And if you want more of the Arroyo Grande Prayerful Posse, subscribe to the Arroyo Grande Show on YouTube or the Arroyo Grande podcast, wherever you get yours. On behalf of Father Gerald Murray, until the posse rides again, stay the course, follow the light. I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll see you next time. Hopefully we'll bring Bob back next time, Father. We miss him. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and DP Studios and is available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.